Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So if you were listening to the previous episode, episode 86, you know that what we're in the midst of here on the podcast is a 3-episode series where we are breaking down the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and that is the #1 best-selling leadership book of all time by John Maxwell. And last time we talked about laws number 1 through 7. And on today's episode, we're going to break down laws 8 through 14. And then in episode 88, we will round out the 21 laws with laws 15 through 21. And so my goal for this episode, as it was for last episode, is to introduce you to the law, to explain it a little bit, but then really apply it to your specific role as a private school leader, and to help you see how these laws and applying these laws can really change your leadership and change your school. And so before we get into that, I just wanted to quickly share with you the laws that we're going to cover today. And we're going to do laws 8 through 14. And they are Law 8, the Law of Intuition; Law 9, the Law of Magnetism; Law number 10, the Law of Connection; Law number 11, the Law of the Inner Circle; Law number 12, the Law of Empowerment; Law 13, the Law of the Picture; and Law number 14, the Law of Buy-in. But just before we jump into that, I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast by giving you a free gift. And it is called The 7 Steps to Having Successful Meetings with Upset Parents. This is an 11-page PDF that gives you a step-by-step plan to have better meetings with the parents at your school. Every good coach has a game plan. Every good teacher has a lesson plan. But I think that too many private school leaders don't have a plan when they sit down to meet with an upset parent. Well, now you have a plan. And you can grab this free guide at theprivateschoolleader.com/meeting. And again, that's the 7 steps to having successful meetings with upset parents at theprivateschoolleader.com/meeting. That's free for you, just to say thank you for listening to the podcast every week. And if you've gotten value from listening to the podcast, I would really love to work with you one-on-one. If you've ever considered leadership coaching, specifically with someone like myself with over 30 years of experience as a private school leader, 21 of those as a head of school, I would love to take my experience and help you to feel less overwhelmed, less frustrated, or maybe help you have success as a brand new leader or a leader in a new role. I work with aspiring heads of school to help them accelerate their leadership growth. Pretty much whatever it is that you need as a leader, I can help you get from where you are today to realizing that preferred future that you want and get clear on what that is for the future. And so if what I'm describing is intriguing to you, then check out more information about that at theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching and learn more about working with me one-on-one. And that's theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching. And then finally, I just wanted to remind you about Thrive Academy. I built an online course that is available to you to engage with content that I really believe can change your life. Pretty much I've taken everything that I've learned about time management and work-life blend with boundaries and energizing relationships and effective leadership and getting clear on your purpose and your identity and values and how that informs your leadership. And all of that is baked into Thrive Academy. And it's an online course with over 9 hours of video content and 39 lessons. and an 86-page workbook with guided notes and reflection questions and calls to action and habit tracking calendars. And if you purchase Thrive Academy, you get the first 6 weeks after you make the purchase, you get live office hours with me on Zoom, so I can help you to get through the content and to be successful. But the most important part is for you to apply it, to be intentional, and to really go from survival mode to thriving, or to just really set yourself up to have a great school year. So again, that's Thrive Academy. You can check it out over at theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. That's theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. And I told you that we're working on laws 8 through law 14 of the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell on today's episode. And I will link that book in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 87. By way of introduction, I want to remind you what I mentioned last week that is actually in the introduction of this excellent book. And there are 4 things. Number 1, the laws can be learned. This isn't something that, you're either born a leader or you're not. Each one of these laws can be learned. Also, number 2, these laws can stand alone. You don't have to apply all 21 of these laws to be successful. If you start to apply 1 or 2 of these laws, you will see a change in your leadership and a change in the culture at your school. Number 3, the laws carry consequences with them. And what that means is either positive or negative. If you use the laws, then you will have positive outcomes for you personally and at your school. But if you ignore the laws, that brings consequences as well. And those typically show up in a lot of ways with the culture and with teacher turnover and just with a lot of the things that we're trying to avoid as school leaders. And then number 4, the laws are the foundation of leadership. And I said in episode 86 that I believe this is the best leadership book ever written. It is the best-selling leadership book of all time. It's about 26 years ago now that it came out. And whether you read the book or not, I hope that you get value from us breaking these down and trying to apply them to you and your situation at your school. All right, let's begin with law number 8, the law of intuition. So the law of intuition states that leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias, and that makes sense. As leaders, we look at things through the lens of a leader. And leaders have a natural ability to read situations and to understand people and maybe even foresee opportunities or challenges. Some of this comes with, this intuition not only allows you to make quick and informed decisions, but it allows you to kind of latch on to information that others might not see, kind of the big picture. But just an intuition, let's face it, that's a little bit hard to define. And admittedly, it's also a little bit difficult to improve. Some of that just comes with experience of dealing with different situations. But if you view everything through the lens of a leadership bias, and you really try to anticipate and be very self-aware, but also very aware of different situations in your school, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but those are some ways that you can improve your intuition as a leader at your school. And so with each of these laws, I want to try to apply it to you as a private school leader. So for law number 8, I have I have 3 things here. Number 1 is apply the law of intuition by reading situations. So a good leader, a good school leader, is going to be able to quickly assess and understand the dynamics of various situations within the school. And so, for example, it might be in a staff meeting or in a division meeting, like let's say it's the middle school teachers or it's the lower school teachers. And the background of that there's some underlying tension or unspoken concerns, or people are unhappy about a decision that's a curriculum decision, or maybe a decision about the discipline of a student. And so again, it's reading situations, being able to take the temperature of the room, and then addressing these issues directly and empathically instead of just ignoring them. If you ignore them, they're not going to get better. They're not going to go away. And it can help you to prevent conflict and to hopefully maintain a positive work environment. So the first application of the law of intuition is reading situations. And then the second is to understand people. And I know that might sound very, very, very difficult to do with the amount of people that you work with, but we really need to get to know our staff and their strengths, their weaknesses, their triggers, what motivates them, what demotivates them, to just really become a student of the people that we work with and that work for you, that the more that you can understand people, that actually will increase your intuition when you're interacting with them or when you see how they are interacting with other people. So for example, if you know that this particular teacher kind of has a short fuse and has like a low tolerance level for people that are disorganized, well, if they're on a team with someone who is not very organized, you can be prepared for how that might go. And again, just recognizing also when a teacher is feeling overwhelmed. Everyone is different. Their level of what they can take at different points in the year is different. And you have to be really locked in on that and knowing your people and using your intuition to know who needs more support now, and who is doing okay. I'm a big believer in reading body language. I try to put eyeballs on every one of the teachers that I supervise at least once a day. And that also translates into being a visible leader, but that's a topic for another episode. And so again, maybe one specific example could be that if you're really using your intuition, you're really in tune with a teacher, that there's some significant stuff going on outside of work with her, maybe with an elderly parent, maybe you offer to get her recess duty covered for a couple of days, just to kind of give her a little bit of margin in that specific moment. So, and then the third way to implement, to show, to demonstrate, to grow with the law of intuition is to make quick and informed decisions. And so we need to make decisions swiftly and confidently. Nobody likes to follow a leader who waffles and changes their mind and takes forever to make a decision and then second guesses themselves. And, so I'm not saying that, everything has to be a knee-jerk decision, but the other extreme is also problematic. And so and this is why you need to really build that ability to have that intuition, is because we know that in school things change suddenly and that decisions have to be made quickly, and that we try to gather information as quickly as possible, but often we have to make those decisions quickly. So all of that is the law of intuition. Okay, on to law number 9, and that is the law of magnetism. So the law of magnetism states that who you are is who you attract. Okay, who you are is who you attract. And so leaders tend to attract people who are similar to themselves in terms of values, attitudes, abilities, and that's also even true. Apart from that, it might be true regarding like race and age and level of experience. It could also be interests. It could be political views. So we tend to hire people and we tend to attract people who are similar to ourselves. And so there's a couple things there. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing in one specific way, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But, your personal qualities and your characteristics as a leader are going to play a huge role in shaping the team or in the team of teachers and staff that you lead at your school, because you are likely going to attract people who are going to follow your example. And so the one way that this can be challenging is if you, with your hiring practice, only surround yourself with people who think the way that you think. And I'm talking generationally, gender, different types of experience, if everyone that is on your team are people that have only ever lived in the county where your school exists, no one from anywhere else, no one that's been anywhere else. You see what I'm getting at? It's like, too similar is going to lead to an echo chamber, and that's not good for your school. So what are some applications of the law of magnetism? Well, first, and this one's kind of just really common sense, is that you want to embody the core values that you want to see in your staff and in your students, because again, the whole idea of the law of magnetism is that who you are is who you attract. So they're going to model who you are, whether they consciously realize it or not. And so then we better be embodying and modeling core values that we want in our school. And so integrity, high standards, compassion, emotional intelligence, being consistent with our values, ethical decision-making, fairness in disciplinary actions or in dealing with teachers, growth mindset, empathy. There's a long list of things that are great traits that we would want to have, but we need to remember that those are super important in general, but they're super important specifically as it relates to our team and them wanting to follow us. And also, like I said, we attract people that are like us. Also, a positive attitude. Number 2 is fostering a positive attitude. I think that that as the leader of the school, I'm not saying that we need to have toxic positivity, because that is something that people tune out and then they feel like you're out of touch. But I do believe that you should be the most upbeat, optimistic, enthusiastic person at the school. And not in a, like I said, head in the clouds or head in the sand kind of a way, but just in a, we're going to get through this kind of a way. And so again, that positive attitude can be contagious, just like a negative attitude. And also, I think proactivity, positivity and proactivity when things are challenging, when things are, changing quickly at your school, that can build a lot of resilience, and it can attract staff who are resilient and who are more like solution oriented than they are complaint oriented. So think about that. The more that you demonstrate that optimism and resilience, the more that's what you're going to attract, and the more that's what you're going to model for your team. And then that can improve morale and improve the culture of your team. So again, we're talking about the law of magnetism. And then third and finally on the law of magnetism is just that maintaining your ethical standards, and leaders who consistently act ethically will attract other leaders who prioritize integrity, other staff members. And so you've listened to this podcast for a while now, and you know that I talk a lot about integrity and the example that we set, and our character and ethical decision-making and transparency and authenticity. Those are the key, most important things, because if those don't exist, if those are inconsistent for you as a leader, then it doesn't matter how skilled and how good of a leader you are, you're going to have problems at your school with your team. And so, again, just trying to maintain those ethical standards. And that's law number 9, the law of magnetism. So let's go on to law number 10, the law of connection. So the law of connection, according to John Maxwell, states that the leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. Leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. And Teddy Roosevelt once famously said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so if we want to be effective leaders in our school, we have to be connecting with people on an emotional level. And if we connect with them on an emotional level, we can influence them to take action. Remember in the last episode, 86, one of the first laws that we talked about was the law of influence, and how we want to be influencers. We want to use persuasion, and we want people to choose to follow, as opposed to being a positional leader and command and control and coerce people into following. And so how do we improve that law of connection? Well, some of this is ground that we've covered before, but just strong, genuine relationships and getting to know your people, caring about them as human beings first and as employees second, and building that trust relationship. And then you can continue to connect with your people. So what are some ways that we can improve the law of connection and really use that as leaders at our school? Well, one, of course, is to just really focus on building personal relationships. And that takes time. And that takes you being out of your office. And that I know that that's hard to do because there's so much to do at our schools. But being out, and especially at those high visibility times, for me, what I try to do every day is to be out during the lunch and recess block. And so all of the 4th through 8th grade teachers that I supervise, almost every one of them has either a lunch or a recess duty. And if I'm out there, not only can I interact with the kids, but I can also interact with those teachers. And as a bare minimum, I can take a look and kind of read their body language. But what I really try to do is just have a quick check in with them. Hey, how's it going? And, does it happen every single day? No. Does it happen with every single person, even when I'm outside for recess and lunch? No, but it's never going to happen if I'm in my office during recess and lunch almost every day. And so those more high visibility times like lunch, recess, arrival, dismissal, class changes, if you're a religious school and you have a weekly religious service or a daily religious service, those are the high visibility times when you can really have those personal touches and those personal interactions and continue to let your teachers and your team know that you actually care about them as a person and not just as an employee. And then number 2 under the law of connection is showing empathy and understanding. I think we need to try to turn empathy into a superpower as private school leaders, to think about, well, how can I put myself in this person's shoes? How can I put on those quote unquote empathy goggles where I can view this situation through their eyes? And so I'll give you an example. It was in the 90s and the early 2000s when I was a school leader / teaching principal and we had young children. Well, that was a long time ago. It's been 20 years since my daughters were little. And, but if I'm talking to a teacher who has little kids, I need to use empathy in order to remember and to view how, with exhaustion or with running, out right after school to get a kid to an event. Everyone has different needs and different seasons in their life, but that's where empathy comes in, is to be intentional about trying to put yourself in their shoes. And then third and finally, under the law of connection, is to be present and approachable. And I talked about visibility before, and just because you're visible doesn't mean that you're approachable. What's your resting face like? I know for me, sometimes I intend to have a inviting resting face, but what I have is a look of concern or concentration on my face because I'm thinking about a challenge or where I'm headed to next or things like that. And then the vibe that I'm giving off is don't bother me, don't approach me. And so we have to earn our Academy Award every day as school leaders. And so being visible and approachable, that's going to help you connect more with the teams that you lead. And so it allows you, when you're a visible leader, to have those spontaneous conversations and, to just have teachers for you to pop in or for them to pop in. And, what we want to try to avoid is that when you have a conversation with a teacher, it's so rare that they get stressed because they think something's wrong. And it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of discipline because you are dealing with the tyranny of the urgent. And that thing, asking the 5th grade math teacher, how did your mom's surgery go? That's not urgent, but it is very, very important. And so law number 10 is the law of connection. And that brings us to law number 11, law of the inner circle. So the law of the inner circle states that a leader's potential is determined by those closest to them. And you may have heard that there's a comment that's out there. I'm not exactly sure who to attribute it to, but it says that we are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. And so if we surround ourselves with a strong and capable team, that's awesome. But we just need to think about our inner circle and how, to the best of our abilities, that these need to be individuals that complement our strengths and weaknesses, and also bring some diverse perspectives and skills to the table to balance us out. And so that kind of goes back to the law that we were talking about earlier, when we were talking about the law of magnetism, how we attract people that are like ourselves, and that we need to be careful that we don't get into an echo chamber. So how do we intentionally make the law of the inner circle, put it into practice, and to improve in this area? Well, I think the first thing is with hiring practices. So I know that sometimes when you become a leader, you inherit leaders. So it might be that you become the head of school, and that the head of middle school and the head of lower school have been there for a number of years, and that's who you have. And so you can help shape them into the kind of leaders that you want them to be. But when the opportunity arises for someone that is influential on the team departs, or especially with hiring practices, to really, instead of that bias of hiring someone that's like you, is to seek out a talented individual for the hire, that you prioritize the leadership potential and the ethical decision making and all that. But also, it doesn't hurt if that person, if all things being equal between 2 candidates, if there's one that brings something different to the table than what's already happening with the inner circle, that is the person that you want to strongly consider going with, because, again, to try and avoid that echo chamber. And then professional development, to just grow your team. The team that you have, if you want that inner circle that's influencing you to grow, then we often spend time and money in professional development for our teachers, but it's much more rare for the leadership team. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I get that, but if you want them to grow, then they have to grow, and they're going to follow your example. And so maybe you share this podcast with them if you haven't done so already, or some of the resources that are free at theprivateschoolleader.com/resources. There's lots of ways that you can, for free, get into professional development. And then there's your professional organization, whether it's NAIS or ACSI or the Catholic Schools organization, whatever it is for you. There are webinars, and there are many different ways that you can grow your team professionally, and that will help with that law of the inner circle. It's just going to be like a rising tide lifting all the boats. Okay, so that brings us to law number 12, which is the law of empowerment. And the law of empowerment emphasizes the importance of empowering others to lead. So that's pretty straightforward. And here's the thing: effective leaders don't hoard power, but they share power. So I'm going to say that again. Effective leaders don't hoard power, they share power. And that's really hard to do, because especially if you're dealing with some imposter syndrome, if you're dealing with some insecurities about your competence or your years of experience, sharing power is the last thing you feel like doing, because we are not confident in that. And it's like, oh no, what if I delegate to one of these other leaders and they do a great job with this, and then it kind of makes me look bad? Well, do you want your school to grow? Do you want that leader to grow? Do you want to grow? Or do you want to just stay stuck and keep putting on that mask every day that you're an imposter and you have to hoard all the power and all the decision making? That's not good for you. It's not good for your school, and it's not good for your team. So you have to enable them to grow and take ownership and contribute by delegating things to them. And so Of course, that's the first suggestion underneath the law of empowerment, is to delegate authority. And whether that's other admins or it's teachers or lead teachers, to give them the autonomy or the authority to make some decisions in their areas of responsibility instead of micromanaging them. You know, the one of the biggest problems with leadership in America is that leaders who feel insecure and who are not properly trained or experienced enough to lead people, they tend to micromanage people that are underneath them. So let me give you a quick example. So let's say that there's a guy who is the produce manager at a grocery store, and he has been in that role for 9 years. And then the job for store manager opens up at this grocery store, and he applies and he gets hired, and now he's the store manager. Well, if he's never been trained to lead people, where do you think he's going to spend most of his time? He's going to be in the produce section, and he's probably going to be micromanaging, like, well, why are you setting up the tomato display that way? And no, the bananas don't go there. We've never put the bananas there. They go over here. All right. So you kind of get the idea of what I'm going for here is that when we feel insecure, we tend to micromanage, and that just really is a bad way to go about trying to get people to buy in and to follow through with tasks that we've assigned to them. So we have to try and set aside that insecurity when it comes to delegating things, and to just give them support, and to help guide them and help get them what they need. But then it's also that's the second point, is just providing the resources and support that someone needs once you've delegated it, promoting the collaboration and teamwork among team members once you've delegated a task, and then to celebrate the successes when someone does do a good job with a task that you've delegated to them, and also to learn from failures and not just like write it off and be like, when someone messes up, well, I'm never delegating anything to that person again. You know, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you have a team, even if you are the only administrator at a smaller school and you have an office staff. You know, if you're not delegating some things to some of your teachers, then you're saying, I'm going to do all of this by myself. And I know that I don't know your situation, but I know a lot of different situations, and I've been in them, and I've coached a lot of people at a lot of different schools. And I just feel like this is a theme where people don't delegate, leaders don't delegate, and then they become so overwhelmed. And there are some people that probably could do the thing. And if a person can do the thing about 80% or 70% as well as you could do it, they need to be doing that thing. And the problem is that unless we think someone can do it 100% as well, then we don't delegate it, and then we're just going to keep it, and that's a recipe for burnout. So don't do that to yourself. All right, that brings us to law number 13, and that is the law of the picture. So the law of the picture underscores the importance of setting a positive example, because people do what people see. And we must embody the values and behavior and attitude that we want others to follow. So it's the law of the picture is basically people do what people see. And if we want people in our organization, in our school, to do certain things and to act a certain way and to demonstrate different behaviors and character traits, then we're going to model that for them. And so what are we going to show? Just a couple. Integrity, of course. I won't get into that. I've been saying that the whole episode. But exhibit professionalism. I want to talk about that for a second. So, you know, you act professionally, you dress professionally, you speak and you write professionally, you have a predictable mood, and that is professional. And just your demeanor and your overall tone is one of a professional executive level leadership person in an organization. And so you might be like, well, you know, we're pretty casual at my school and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, but you know, your level of professionalism, very few people are going to exceed that. You're going to set the standard. You're going to set the bar for professionalism. And I think that some leaders kind of don't do a great job with this, and then they wonder why many of their team members are acting unprofessionally. And if we want to really make an impression of competence and earn confidence and respect and a good reputation from our parents, then it starts at the top with the professionalism. A couple of other things I think that we need to model, because people copy what they see and they do what they see you doing, is to model a growth mindset, that when you come up against challenges, that it's like just this willingness to take on challenges and to accept feedback and just have a lot of resilience. And then also for you to prioritize work-life balance. And I can hear what you're saying. You're like, yeah, right. That's a pipe dream. Well, there's a lot of episodes that, and I can link one in the show notes, that we've done about like work-life balance or work-life blend with boundaries. But you have to model that. If you don't want your teachers to burn out, if you're there, first one there and last one to leave, and I know that that's kind of the case for most of us, but also then the weeknights and the weekends, and we're sending and receiving emails at all kinds of crazy hours. Like, there's a better way. I can't take a whole lot of time right now to talk about that, but I can link a couple of resources in the show notes, that there's a better way. And we're just going to run our teachers into the ground if what we're modeling is us running ourselves into the ground. And then also to promote diversity and inclusion and equity. People are going to adopt those attitudes that we display. And then also clear communication and effective communication. Those are all excellent things to model for our team. And there could be a very long list, but we'll just leave it at that. And then that brings us to law number 14, and the last of the 7 laws for today's episode, and that is the law of buy-in. And so this law emphasizes the importance of getting people to buy into your vision as a leader. And people are more committed to things that they've helped to create or shape. And people have a basic human need, a human desire to want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And you're the one that's responsible for making them have a very clear connection between what they do and the vision and mission of the school and the difference that it makes in the lives of kids. And so how do you do that? Well, a lot of it is just you clearly articulating the vision and mission and doing it often in a bunch of different ways and showing how it aligns with the values and of the school and the aspirations that you have. And storytelling is compelling. If you have stories from the past about success stories, some of the ones that I like to talk about are kids who, when they came in under our care in intermediate and middle school, started out in 4th grade, and this one girl cried every day, and by 8th grade, she's the lead in the musical and the president of student council, those kinds of things that are stories that happen at your school all the time. Well, people don't want to just be people. It's going to be hard to inspire people with a vision statement or a mission statement that are just kind of words on a page. It's your job as the leader to take the vision and mission of the school and humanize it. And so how do you do that? Well, again, storytelling and to use your emotional intelligence and to connect with people emotionally, because what we do is emotional work as we work with these boys and girls. And it is just something that we have to, maybe we don't feel comfortable or feel skilled doing that, but the buy-in is going to go through the roof when people see how what they contribute is part of this inspiring, aspirational, amazing story of this school. And so law number 14 is the law of buy-in. So let's wrap it up. What are our big takeaways from today's episode? We've talked about 7 of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Law number 8, the law of intuition. Law number 9, the law of magnetism. Law number 10, the law of connection. Law number 11, law of the inner circle. Law 12, law of empowerment. Law number 13, the law of the picture. And law 14, the law of buy-in. And your call to action this week is to pick one law from this episode and take 15 minutes this week and decide how you're going to take action in and to apply and improve your ability in this area with this particular law. So let's wrap it up by reminding you of another free resource that I have available for you. It's called The 6 Things That Every Private School Teacher Wants from Their Leader. And this is a 6-page PDF that I think can be a game changer for you. You know, this book that we're talking about, 21 Laws, we want to be great leaders. And I really feel strongly that if you do these 6 things, that the teachers at your school will be happy to follow you. And you can grab that free guide at theprivateschoolleader.com/guide. That's the 6 things that every private school teacher wants from their leader. Just go to theprivateschoolleader.com/guide to grab that. And then the last thing I'll mention is that at the top of the episode, I mentioned about coaching and about Thrive Academy. You know, if you're listening to this in real time, it's near the beginning of your summer, and maybe have more time to grow yourself and to not have another school year like you had last year, or to take your school to the next level or take your leadership to the next level. And so you can check out more information about coaching at theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching, or the online course Thrive Academy by going to theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. And I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com and let me know about a strategy that you used, or maybe what was your biggest pain point from this past school year. Make sure you subscribe to the episode or to the podcast so you never miss an episode. The show notes are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 87. Wherever you get this podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, just please rate and review the podcast to help the algorithm push it out as suggested content to school leaders all over the world. And I'm on Instagram at The Private School Leader and on Twitter at The PS Leader. And please share the link to this podcast with another school leader in your life or an aspiring leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of your hard work. And I really appreciate you taking some precious time out of your week to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.